They told you men want power. They told you women want love. They weren't wrong, but they weren't honest either. Because what they never told you is that both power and connection are not just desires, they are compensations. Coverts, instinctual responses to wounds buried too deep for words. A man doesn't crave power because he's strong. He craves it because he's been taught that only power will protect him from being seen as weak, from being touched where his soul still bleeds. A woman doesn't crave connection because she's soft. She craves it because in a world that rewards stoicism and punishes tenderness, connection becomes her rebellion, her survival, her quiet war against a world that forgot how to feel. Carl Jung knew this, that what we chase externally is often what we lost internally. The man who rises for dominance is often the boy who is never held. The woman who reaches for closeness is often the girl who was told her feelings were too much, her voice too loud, her presence too heavy. Power and connection, masculine and feminine, control and vulnerability. Two poles of the same fractured psyche, dancing in conflict, aching for union. This is not about gender roles. This is about archetypes, timeless energies within us, battling for balance in a world that polarizes instead of integrates. So the question isn't, why do men crave power and women crave connection? The question is, what are we all running from? And more importantly, what are we truly seeking underneath it all? Because beneath every craving is a memory, not just personal, ancestral. A man doesn't seek power randomly. He seeks it because he once saw what happened when his father had none. He seeks it because he once felt the helplessness of watching a world punish softness in men, call it weak, call it shameful. Because he learned early that vulnerability is a currency he cannot afford to spend. And so he builds. He builds muscles, empires, silence. He sharpens ambition like a sword. Not to conquer the world, but to silence the boy inside him, screaming, will I ever be enough without all this? Because he doesn't just want power over others, he wants power over his own fear, his own tenderness, his own aching need to be understood, not just respected. And what about her? She doesn't seek connection by accident either. She seeks it because her mother abandoned her in the name of duty. Because her father loved her when she was pleasing but disappeared when she was real. Because the world rewarded her when she was sweet but punished her when she was honest. And so she learns to perform closeness, to keep peace at the expense of truth, to self-abandon just to feel loved, to bend until she forgets her own shape, all in the name of intimacy. But the intimacy she craves is not shallow. It's not needy. It's sacred. She wants to be seen, to be felt, to be known not for the image she's curated, but for the storm of truths she hides behind her smile. Men are not addicted to power. They are addicted to the illusion of control, because control feels safer than collapse. Women are not addicted to connection. They are addicted to being chosen because for too long their worth has been negotiated through the gaze of others. This isn't pathology. It's conditioning, and what was conditioned can be unlearned. But unlearning requires honesty, a radical confrontation with the myth we've been told about who we're supposed to be. Because here's the deeper truth. The masculine doesn't just want power. He wants peace. He wants to take off the armor without losing his dignity. He wants to speak without being emasculated. He wants to cry without being called broken. And the feminine doesn't just want connection. She wants truth. She wants to express without apology. She wants to be angry without being called hysterical. She wants to stop performing and start being, but we can't get there through pretending. We get there through integration, through the man who says, I am powerful, yes, but I am also tired. through the woman who says, I want to be loved, but not at the cost of my silence. That's where the healing begins, not in swinging between extremes, but in standing at the center of the storm and choosing wholeness over performance. Power without domination. Connection without self-abandonment. Masculine that protects without controlling. Feminine that feels without collapsing. This is the new myth. The one where we don't have to choose between strength and softness. The one where we don't have to sabotage love to protect pride. The one where we stop projecting our pain and start transmuting it. Because the world doesn't need more powerful men or more connected women. It needs more conscious humans. Humans who have stopped hiding behind roles. Humans who are brave enough to say, this is what I was taught, but this is what I choose now. Shall I continue with the next wave of this cinematic monologue? Because that choice, that small, defined, trembling choice to rewrite the myth, to look your archetype in the eye and say, you no longer lead me unconsciously, is how everything changes. That is when the man no longer builds from emptiness, but from essence. No longer climbs out of fear, but rises from clarity. Not to dominate the world, but to stand rooted in his own. He learns that true power doesn't come from being feared, obeyed, admired. It comes from the capacity to hold space for others, for discomfort, for his own shadow without shame. Because real masculinity doesn't suppress emotion. It knows how to contain it. Not to cage it, but to channel it. To bring fire, not as destruction, but as light. And the woman, she no longer reaches for connection as compensation. She no longer dissolves herself just to merge with another. She connects from wholeness. Her words no longer seek permission, they declare. Her eyes no longer beg, they witness. Her softness is no longer a disguise, it's a weapon of healing. She becomes the embodiment of sacred presence, not to soothe another's fear, but to embody her own truth, wild, untamed, unapologetic. And when these two meet not in masks, but in essence, something ancient is reborn, not romance. Union. The sacred polarity of conscious masculine and conscious feminine. Two sovereigns, two mirrors, two healed lineages meeting not to complete each other, but to expand each other. No longer reenacting old wounds, no longer punishing each other for old betrayals, but standing in the temple of truth and saying, I am not here to fix you. I am here to face you. And in facing you, I find myself. That is the new myth. Not man versus woman, not power versus connection, but the sacred reborn from two eyes who dared to become whole. This is not philosophy. It is a revolution. One that begins the moment you ask yourself, what part of me has mistaken control for safety? What part of me has mistaken love for losing myself? And am I ready to stop blaming my biology and start reclaiming my biology as consciousness? Because we were never meant to be each other's captors. We were meant to be each other's catalysts. Not for codependence, for co-evolution. So drop the script, burn the roads, kill the myth, and meet here, now as the wild, wounded, awakening beings you truly are. Not perfect, not healed, but aware. And in that awareness, everything that once felt like conflict becomes alchemy. Everything you once craved out of lack becomes offered from fullness. And that is the love that doesn't enslave. That is a power that doesn't corrupt. That is the connection that doesn't cage. That is truth. Shall we continue deeper? Because truth, real truth, doesn't choose sides. It integrates opposites. It says the masculine is not the enemy. The feminine is not the victim. They are partners in remembering what the soul already knows. You are not your wound. You are the witness to it. You are the alchemist of it. You are the one who turns patterns into presence, longing into liberation, hunger into home. And home is not a person, not a partner, not a performance. Home is the version of you who no longer reaches from lack, who no longer performs worthiness, who no longer manipulates connection out of fear but attracts it through resonance. Because when you stop needing power to feel valuable, you become powerful. And when you stop needing connection to feel whole, you become magnetic. This is what Jung meant when he said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not the son who inherited armor, not the daughter who inherited shame, but the self before the roles, the soul before the distortion, the truth before the conditioning, and that self that you does not crave from emptiness. He does not dominate to feel worthy. She does not disappear to feel loved. They meet fully, honestly, dangerously alive, and when they meet, they don't reenact the battle. They end it. No more proving, no more pleasing, no more seducing through survival. Only presence, only permission, only the terrifying, holy silence of two people saying, I am not here to save you. I am here to see you. Because this is the truth. Men never truly wanted power. They wanted to be safe enough to put it down. And women never truly wanted to be chosen. They wanted to be free enough to choose themselves first. Now you know. Now you see. And now you have a choice. To continue the myth or burn it down. To chase illusions or embody essence. To reenact pain or rise in truth. And if you choose to rise not in resistance, but in remembrance, then you no longer crave. You create, you become the sanctuary you once sought in others. And from that place, you no longer attract lovers who mirror your wounds. You attract partners who honor your wholeness. That's the path. That's the revolution. And it doesn't start out there. It starts within, are you ready? Then come closer. Not to another, but to yourself. Come closer to the part of you that never had to become anything to be worthy. The part that existed before the performance, before the chase, before power became protection and connection became currency. That part of you, the untouched, unbroken, unconditioned self, is still here, still breathing beneath the layers of survival, still burning beneath the mask. You don't need to seek power when you remember you are the source. You don't need to cling to love when you are love unarmored. This is the core wound of our time. We have mistaken doing for being. We have confused force with strength, sacrifice with loyalty, and dependency with devotion. We were never taught the difference because no one benefits from a man who no longer needs to dominate. No one profits from a woman who no longer fears being alone. But you are not here to serve systems that keep you small. You are here to undo them. You are here to remember that your masculine is sacred, not violent. Your feminine is powerful, not passive. That the man who cries is not weak. He is finally free. That the woman who says no without guilt is not cold. She is finally sovereign. This is not rebellion. This is restoration of balance, of breath, of the original agreement between the masculine and feminine within you. I protect you. I feel for you. I do not suppress. I serve. And once this inner union is restored, the war outside becomes irrelevant. You stop attracting chaos. You stop seducing ghosts. You stop chasing validation in broken reflections. Because you no longer need someone to complete your myth. You need someone who honors your truth. And when two people meet in that place, not to fill each other, but to witness each other. They don't fall in love. They rise in it. They don't lose themselves. They finally find themselves in each other's presence, not as saviors, as mirrors, as equals, as flames from the same fire finally unafraid to burn. That is what men are truly craving. That is what women are truly longing for. Not what the world taught us, but what the soul remembers. And if you're ready to unlearn everything false to return to what's real, then this isn't the end. It's the beginning. No more craving, just choosing. No more surviving, just becoming. Welcome home, because home isn't where you were raised. It's where you return when you're no longer performing. Home is the silence after self-abandonment ends. Home is the breath you take when you realize I don't need to earn love anymore. Home is in the man who lays down his sword, not because he's defeated, but because he's finally safe. Home is in the woman who stops waiting to be chosen and decides, I choose me fully, first. And from that soil, from that fierce and fertile ground of truth, new relationships grow not from hunger, but from overflow. Not from fear, but from embodiment. This is the sacred path of individuation. Jung spoke of the path where your shadow becomes your teacher, where your longing becomes your language, where your need for power transforms into presence, and your hunger for connection transforms into communion. Not attachment, not addiction, not repetition, reclamation, reclaiming your voice, your truth, your right to be seen in the raw, uncurated version of yourself, and not run, not shrink, not shapeshift, to be held as you are, to hold without needing to fix. Because we are not here to master each other, we are here to master ourselves. And in doing so, we make space for love that isn't built on trauma scripts. Love that isn't the replay of ancient pain. Love that isn't a battlefield, but a sanctuary. So the man becomes still and powerful, not because he controls, but because he no longer needs to. So the woman becomes bold and soft, not because she pleases, but because she no longer needs to be liked to feel safe. They meet in the middle, no longer enemies, no longer rescuers, but mirrors, reflecting not lack, but liberation. And in that sacred reflection, the craving ends, because what you were chasing was never in them. It was always in you, waiting, breathing, burning quietly beneath the ruins of who you were taught to be. And now, finally, you are ready to rise, to reclaim, to remember, power is not dominance. Connection is not survival. Love is not performance. And you are not a myth waiting to be rescued. You are the fire, the freedom, the future, ready to be lived. Now, without shame, without craving, without compromise. Just truth, just presence, just love finally unafraid to be whole. And in that wholeness, there is no longer a war inside of you to project outward. No more battling the feminine within for being too emotional. No more silencing the masculine within for being too much. Because you've integrated what the world told you to split. You've accepted what culture trained you to reject. You've owned your fire and your softness, your edge and your vulnerability. And that integration, that is where freedom begins. Not the freedom that's sold to you. Not the freedom dressed in ego, avoidance, and hollow empowerment, but the kind that sits quietly in your chest, knowing you don't have to prove your worth anymore. This is the liberation the world fears, because it cannot be bought. It cannot be marketed. It cannot be controlled. A man who knows he is enough without conquest cannot be manipulated. A woman who knows she is complete without being chosen cannot be used. And two people who meet from this place They are dangerous, not to each other, but to the system that relies on disconnection, the system that needs you craving, so you never create, that needs you wounded, so you never remember who you were before the world tamed you. But now you remember. You remember the boy who just wanted to be held before he was taught to clench his fists. You remember the girl who just wanted to speak before she was taught to edit her voice. You remember the self beneath the armor, and you stop mistaking survival for identity, because the craving for power dies when you no longer need to dominate to feel safe. The craving for connection dies when you no longer need to abandon yourself to feel loved. What remains is truth, the truth that neither man nor woman is the enemy, that masculine and feminine are not roles to perform, but energies to balance, that your relationships are not meant to complete you, but to reveal you. And once revealed, you no longer run, you no longer sabotage, you no longer confuse chemistry with compatibility or validation with love. You meet from presence, from clarity, from choice, not from childhood. And in that meeting, you create something this world is starving for. Conscious union, not built on fear, not built on ego, built on truth. And truth is what heals. Truth is what frees. Truth is what ends the craving, the chasing, the collapsing. So you can finally just be, not half, not hollow, but whole and holy. Because when you are whole, you no longer reach for others from the fractured places. You reach from fullness. You no longer ask someone to save you. You invite them to see you. You no longer grip love with desperation. You hold it gently because you know if it's real, it won't run. And if it does, you still won't abandon yourself. That's the final shift, the quiet revolution, the end of the myth, where men stop defining masculinity by how much they can conquer and begin defining it by how deeply they can feel without collapsing, where women stop measuring their worth by how lovable they are and begin measuring it by how authentic they dare to become, where power becomes protection, not oppression, where connection becomes communion, not captivity, where love becomes the place you return to, not to escape yourself, but to meet yourself more deeply. And so you stop craving what you were taught to chase, because you realize power without peace is a prison. Connection without clarity is a cage. And love without truth is just another transaction. But you are not here to repeat what broke you. You are here to become what heals you. You are not here to crave endlessly. You are here to create endlessly from wholeness, from consciousness, from the sacred flame of a self finally remembered. And as you stand in that flame, no longer apologizing, no longer craving, no longer collapsing, you don't just attract love, you embody it. And that is the ultimate rebellion. That is a divine return. That is a story rewritten, not with louder voices or more rules, but with presence, with courage, and with the quiet, unwavering truth of someone who no longer begs to be seen, because you see yourself now. And that changes everything. So here we are, no longer asking who's right, who's wrong, no longer blaming gender, no longer hiding behind biology, but standing bare, bold, awake in the truth that what we crave was never power. It was never connection. It was wholeness. And now we return to it, not in theory, not in fantasy, But in embodiment, no more craving from the wound, no more loving from the fear, no more power games played by broken children wearing adult masks. Now we remember, the masculine does not have to dominate to lead. The feminine does not have to disappear to be loved. Together, not in fusion, but in freedom, they rise. Equal, not in sameness, but in sacred difference. And in that difference, not division, but divinity. So burn the myth. Burn the rules written in fear. Burn the scripts passed down by wounded ancestors who forgot their own fire. And become the first in your bloodline to stop craving and start creating from truth, from soul, from the self that no longer needs a story to feel real. This is not the end. It is the beginning of something unshakable, of men who no longer fear feeling, of women who no longer fear standing alone, of love that no longer mimics pain, of a world that no longer defines strength by who controls, but by who can stay open through the storm. And you are no longer craving. You are becoming. Welcome back. Welcome home.